Hello, everyone. Welcome to lesson P3 on plant reproduction and breeding. This is really just a notes section, so it's mostly notes that you've got in class and just kind of going through the notes. Uh, First thing when we talk about this is that people can choose plants with specific characteristics to reproduce. And so what they do is they breed those things, those plants, and not other plants, and they are choosing those characteristics in order to go on to the next generation. And so, for example, sweetheart cherries are bred with split resistant skin and very strong stems. And this is a very common type of cherry to see in the marketplace. The strong stems mean that they will stay on the trees. They are not going to fall and rot. The split resistant skin, again, keeps them protected and makes it very good for harvesting. Now, sometimes instead of just breeding things, what we look at is scientists will actually go into the cell and change some of the DNA or the genes that will control the plant's characteristics, right? And it's usually done by combining it with another plant's genes. Okay? This is called genetic engineering or genetically modified. And what this is taking something that didn't exist before, a different kind of code that didn't exist before within the plant, and have altered it. Uh, Now, fruits and grains have been modified in order to resist viruses, and peanuts that don't cause allergic reactions have also been just a couple of examples of what we could do with genetic engineering. When we take a look at plant reproduction, essentially there are two types of reproduction. The first one is sexual reproduction, which means this is two plants. Now, these would be two of the same type of plants in order to make seeds. And so you've got two different plants. Asexual occurs when there's only one parent. So asexual, one parent, sexual means two parents, right? Uh, Asexual is usually when plant grows from like the roots, the stem, or the leaves, right? It's not caused by a seed. If we take a look at some of the asexual reproduction methods, roots is a common one that we will see. And this is where the roots of one will grow into another. So if I had a tree here, and it's a poplar tree, and the roots are coming like this under the ground, and eventually the roots pop up and form a new tree that will then grow. And so the roots actually produce new trees. Uh, Layering is another one. Strawberries and raspberries do this, and this is like a runner that goes on top. So if we've got our strawberry plant here on the ground, it sends out these runners, and the runner plants and forms a new one. The other two are a little bit more artificial, right? Where one and two, roots and layering, those are pretty natural asexual reproduction methods, but grafting is another one. And grafting is not really true reproduction, but we're taking the branch of one tree and attaching it to another. So if I were to, let's say, have a tree with these branches here, I would cut this one off, put it and attach it to this other tree and put the branch right here, give it some leaves. Right, so it's cutting off one, placing onto another. And there is actually technique to make sure that it stays on and stays in place. But this is where you get some trees that actually have, let's say, apple trees that actually produce multiple types of apples. It's because they've actually just grafted different branches onto the same tree. Another way we can do it is with plant cuttings. It's when you take a small leaf or stem, cut it off, and you can actually create its own root system. So if we've got a plant here, let's say we've got a flower, I could cut this leaf off, plant that into the ground, and it then starts its own plant, which eventually becomes another flower. Right? So four types of asexual reproduction. Again, all of these involve one parent. Now, if we take a look at sexual reproductions, these again all involve two parents, right? And that can be cones or flowers, but the idea is essentially the same. The wind carries the sperm gamete from a male cone to a female cone and gets caught really in a sticky fluid. We call that an angiosperm. Flowering plants are pollinated when wind or other organisms will actually take the sperm, usually in the form of pollen, to the anther of another flower. And now this could be like birds or bees or other insects, or the wind can even do it in some cases. Right? So that pollination, self-pollination, um, pollination occurs when, again, the sperm fertilizes the eggs in the plant. But if it's self-pollination, it's going to be the same plant. Where cross-pollination is a different plant. Now, even in cross-pollination, we're usually looking at the same type of plant. Sometimes humans can actually do the cross-pollination in order to get new varieties. And so it's artificial pollination is cross-pollination done by humans. Now, it also can be done self-pollination by humans in order to make sure that the pollination happens. But usually when humans do it, got hummus there, not humans. Humans, that's humans. Do it, they're usually doing cross-pollination, right? So you've got the pollen grains from the anthers of one plant, and if this were to go to the stamen of another to fertilize it, or onto the stigma, through the stamen, into the ovary, same plant would be self-pollination, but here we've got it's attached to the bee, comes here, attaches here, pollinates this plant, and so this was a picture of cross-pollination. And that's when it creates a seed. After pollination comes the embryo, which is really just a tiny little plant that's growing. Now, inside the seed, let's pretend this is my seed here. I've got this tiny little plant growing, and it's got a bunch of food around it that is also known as okay, and that's all the food that this tiny little plant inside of the seed has to help keep it going. If you remember this scene from our first video, looks like this.
Right now, in a myriad of spots, preparations for departure are well underway. Each of the thousands of particles on the anthers of this poppy is a passport for the journey. They are pollen grains, catalysts in the miracle of a seed's formation. As a honeybee collects and then transfers pollen to the center of the flower, a fascinating and rarely observed sequence of events is set into motion.
So that's an example of
Through the
self-pollination.
window of the microscope and time-lapse camera, let's take a closer look at a single pollen grain. Containing half of the genetic blueprint for a fully developed plant, the grain germinates and sends a thread-like tube downward toward the interior of the flower. Its destination, the poppy's ovary. Here, within an enclosed chamber, hundreds of ovules await one of creation's most awesome moments. Again, through the microscope, watch as the union of pollen and ovule is actually revealed. Guided by an uncanny sense of direction, the growing tube is drawn directly to the wall of a single unfertilized ovule, and the spark of life is ignited. As the flower fades, both the ovary and its contents mature, and the pod that remains silently declares the seed's formation is complete.
Okay, so when that seed forms, sometimes we see a fruit growing around it, which is really just the ovary that actually grows, and it's really there to protect the seeds. They have the seeds inside them, right? And sometimes that fruit is also a means of transporting the seeds through an organism eating the fruit and therefore distributing the seed. Fruits always have the seeds inside them, things like tomatoes and green beans and cherries, but not all fruit can actually be eaten. Things like the cotton ball. Cotton is actually just the fruit of a cotton plant. Now, there are several seed dispersal methods, and we took a look at this in our first video. And for example, wind blows them and spreads their seeds, such as a tumbleweed. Water will carry them, such as the coconut. Animals will eat them, such as a monkey, and it'll eat the plant and then they poop them out later. Sometimes it can stick to the fur of an animal or stick to the feet of an animal or something in order to get transported. Or a fire can release seeds, such as the case of the lodgepole pine. Now, once a seed is formed to make a new plant, it will germinate. Germination is when the seed then starts to develop into a full new plant. Okay. But sometimes instead of allowing seeds to go to germination, we harvest them. And so we'll use a swather in order to cut the plants and lay them in rows, or a combine to separate the grain from the rest of the plant. Okay, and that is it for the notes for lesson P3. Thanks for watching.